Cheers can be
Good evening and welcome to Fulwell Methodist Church. It's lovely to see so many people here to kind of speak to our political representatives. I'm not going to say much, just to give you a warm welcome, and then I'm going to hand over to Chris to give some housekeeping and to do what he needs to do. Thank you.
Thank you. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to this leaders' debate hosted by Sunderland for Transparency. The organisation was formed early last year following numerous political scandals within the council, something which was sort of challenged through the promoting accountability and transparency within it. We've already had a large impact of forcing the council to record attendance records of councillors. So welcome to the first of the 2019 Sunderland for Transparency public meetings. The debate will last for roughly 2 hours, and there's going to be a 30-minute live question and answer session from members of the audience towards the end, for those of you who wish to participate within it. Quick health and safety information, fire exits at the back and down the side there as well. And there's also a toilet towards the back as well. So with us tonight is the panel in full in order. We've got the Deputy Leader of the Populist Party, Tony Morrow, Chairwoman of Sunderland Green Party, Rachel Featherstone, Glyn Dixon from the Democrats and Veterans, Anthony Mullen, Chairman of the Sunderland Conservative Association, Stephen O'Brien from the Lib Dems, and Richard Elvin, the North East Regional Chairman for UKIP. So without further ado, I'll pass over the floor to Chris Ireland, who's the impartial debate chairman for tonight.
So firstly, I'd like to thank you all for attending tonight's leadership debate. I'd like to thank the many volunteers that have helped publicise the event throughout the city through leafleting events and canvassing various people to let us know what was going on tonight. And I'd also like to thank the Fulwell Methodist Church for being really accommodating and having great hospitality in having us host here. And I'd also like to thank some of the donors to Sunderland for Transparency for supporting our work. It really means a lot. I would also like to thank the many people who have submitted questions for the panel this evening, so we'd have some questions to ask. Is really great. So tonight's format for tonight's actual meeting, it'll begin with a brief introduction from our representatives here tonight, just letting them know who they are and what they're doing and basically why they're here tonight. And following that, we'll have some pre-selected discussion topics, so people will be discussing and having good battles and forwards about the issues that we're discussing tonight. And following that, we're going to have some pre-submitted questions that people have submitted on the Sunderland for Transparency website. So many of your questions you submitted, we had so many to go through, so we're trying to really cut it down to the ones that came up the most, so they get most represented. And after that, it will be a live Q&A from our audience here. So basically, just going forward here, we'd just like to start from just Tony Morrow, just doing a brief introduction, and then we'll just work our way along. Okay.
Tony Morrow, Populist Party. I'm Deputy Leader, run nationwide. in Dorset and working up, starting to move into Wales and Scotland. Tony Morrow, Populist Party. We're starting to grow. We started off in Dorset, working up to the north, moved into Wales and then up to Scotland. Deputy leader now.
Excuse me. As somebody who knows nothing about the Populist Party, can you just give a little review of what the Populist Party is or stands for?
Stands for the people.
Obviously, but by what?
They'll come out in the questions what we are all about. And if you want some literature, I've got some there.
Hello, I'm Rachel Featherstone. I'm the coordinator of Sunderland Green Party, and I also sit on the Green Party National Governance Committee. Now, I've lived in this city, all my life. I'm raising children here, and it's in many ways a really great place to live. But I think it could be even better. But we seem to have a council that's intent on making it worse. They're destroying our green belt, they're wasting our money, they're wasting opportunities in the city centre, and they're letting down our vulnerable people. Especially the children, yes, I think we can say that with some safety. They show no interest in the views of the residents of Sunderland. They're not here tonight. They very rarely turn up to these things. And they occasionally issue these consultations, which we all know are a bit of a joke, because they never get listened to. And there's lots of things that we'd like to change in Sunderland, the Green Party, but one of the first would be to introduce some democracy to the council. Because at the minute, too many decisions are made behind closed doors by small handfuls of councillors on the executive. Now, if you're in the Labour Party, if you're one of the chosen few, you'll be involved in those discussions. If not, you've just got to go along with it, or you get drummed out of the party. If you're not one of the Labour Party councillors, you've got no involvement at all. How can it be right that the people you send to the City Council don't get a say in the decisions that affect your life? That's not democracy. Now, Greens in other parts of the country have managed to drag councils away from this executive model. They've made sure that all elected representatives are involved in constructive discussions and policy making. And they're getting things done, and they're really representing the residents. They've had higher appreciation ratings from the residents and from businesses than they've ever had before on this model. They've moved away from the mudslinging, from the petty childish squabbling, and into real grown-up politics. And that isn't all the Greens have done across the country. Just down the road in Kirklees, they put out a housing refurbishment scheme that saved residents money on their energy bills, created jobs, and cut carbon emissions. In Sheffield, they've got more police, community and support officers on the street. In Lancaster, they've started a solar panel farm that's going to bring in £4 million of revenue over the next 20 years to the council. And in Brighton, they've taken empty, run-down properties and brought them back into use as affordable social housing. And all over the country, Greens are protecting green spaces, they're cutting carbon emissions, and they're tackling climate change. And everywhere that Greens have been elected, they're taking casework seriously. They're committed to their communities and they're working hard. On the Wirral, our one Green councillor has done more casework than the 39 Labour councillors on that council. So we work hard for our communities. And because we're democratic, we're all submitted to a recall petition. If you don't like a Green representative at any level, all you've got to do is get a petition with 20% of the constituents' name on it and we'll run the election again. You don't have to wait for the next set of local elections. We're that confident that you'll like your Green representation. So when it's next local elections, don't vote for the same old, don't vote for the same old complacency, the same old lack of imagination, the same refusal to listen. Vote Green for councillors who really care about you, who work hard for your communities and will listen. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Lynn Dixon. I represent the Democrats and Veterans Party up here in Sunderland. I'm the branch secretary. We are a newly formed party. We formed in February last year. And since then we've contested a few by-elections. We came second in Barnsley and second in Rail in Wales and also second in Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland. We are a direct democracy party, which means that we would put a lot of referendums back to the people, hence the biggest referendum that we've had being Brexit referendum referendum in 2016, and we do as a party hold ourselves accountable. We don't have a party whip, and we run ourselves as independents if needs be as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Anthony Mullen. I'm the Barnes Councillor since last May, and since last Thursday I'm the Chairman of the Sunderland Conservatives. The Conservatives in Sunderland are the city's main opposition party. The reality is that the easiest way to get Labour out is to vote Conservative. What we see this year is that we are presented with the opportunity to win in wards like Doxford, Washington East, and Graham Miller's seat, Washington South, and we are in the best position to take seats from Labour. In addition to that, we also are in the position to win seats we won last year, and in doing so take down some of the key figures within the local Labour Party. If, for example, you vote Conservative in Folwell, you have the opportunity to get rid of Labour's Chief Whip, Margaret Beck. If you vote Conservative in St Peters, you have the opportunity to get rid of the Labour Chair of the Tyne and Wear Fire and Rescue Authority, Barry Curran, and if you vote Conservative in St Chad's, you can get rid of the former Cabinet member Stuart Porthouse from the council. Now, I think there are three things that you should be able to expect from local parties. The first is you should expect us to put up candidates in every ward where you are eligible to vote. And we, the Conservative Party, are putting up 26 candidates this year in all of the vacant seats. You should also expect parties publish a manifesto, which we have done, and you should also be able to expect that we turn up to things like this tonight. And already the Labour Party has failed that. The reality is that we are the city's main opposition party, and that the easiest way to get rid of Labour, mathematically, is to vote Conservative. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm Stephen O'Brien. I'm the Sandhill Ward representative. I'm also the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrat group on Sunderland City Council. Now, I came to this because I think it's massively important to hear residents' voices. I'm not just a person in a building who you might contact over the phone. I actually want to hear what you think. And it's a damn disgrace and indictment of this council that the Labour Party couldn't be bothered to send anyone. They can't be bothered to turn up to a debate and to defend their record. Well, their record is shameful. They have left the Volk site open for 20 some odd years. They have failed children throughout this city in their failing children's services. They've also had criminals and unsavoury people as councillors, and they just try and hide that under a rug. Now, I could go on and say what the Liberal Democrats have done. We've introduced public questions at council meetings. We've tried to end free meals for councillors. We've tried with the Conservatives, in all fairness, to curb expenses and allowances. And we will be trying to do that again. We also, like the Conservatives, are standing in every ward. We suspect that we will hopefully gain seats, because let's face it, the Labour Party is utterly shocking. But most of all, us Liberals and as Liberal Democrats, we want to hear what you think, and we always respond to any kind of debate or any kind of public opening. I'm sorry, I didn't write an emotional open speech because I was drafted in at the last minute, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys think throughout the evening. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Richard Elvin. I'm the regional chairman for UKIP. It's great to see so many of you here tonight at a traditional hustings, which is the cornerstone of British democracy. We expect our politicians to attend public hustings and place themselves before the electorate to be scrutinised. Regrettably, in the one-party state of Sunderland, Labour are so entrenched, such events are beneath them. So certain are they that they will be re-elected, they never turn up. Openness, transparency and accountability are very close to my heart and key planks to the administration that I am in charge of in Hetton. I've been a councillor in Hetton for the last 4 years. For over 40 years there's only ever been Labour councillors there. In 2015 we broke them all by getting 8 elected. From the very first meeting it became obvious that openness, transparency and accountability were the last things on the minds of the Labour councillors. Secrecy and obfuscation were their priorities. Public participation was very restricted. Meetings held behind closed doors to ensure residents were kept in the dark, and expenditure never fully itemised. Inclusion with the town clerk, residents and other councillors' queries were never raised, and answers to all questions were met with a stock reply. I'll raise that query with the relevant body and report back, but guess what? They never did, even though we brought up the queries time and time again. It appeared to us that the Labour councillors were more concerned with organising and attending events at which food and drink were paid for out of the public purse. As a result of the by-elections in January 2017 and in association with independents, we became the majority. Guess what? Labour threw the toys out of the pram. They refused to sit on any committees, and their attendance at our monthly meetings was greatly reduced. On some occasions, none of them turned up. But we stuck to our pledges. And during the last 12 months, we have transformed the council. Public participation is available at all meetings. Expenditure is itemised and published every month. Accounts have been regularised. Entertainment costs eliminated. The mayor's expenses virtually eliminated. Overhead slashed, resulting in more money being available to spend in Hetton. The result is what the public deserves: elected representatives that would ensure openness, transparency and accountability, and the money being spent where it should be spent, on members of the public, not on the councillors. Thank you.
Okay, Richard Alvin, thank you very much. So we're going to jump straight into our debate section now. The first topic we have is housing, and it begins as this. It says that housing here is an issue in Sunderland that's affecting many residents. If elected in the local council, what does your party intend to do about this crisis? I think I'll hand this over to Rachel here.
Well, we know that the housing situation is in crisis. We've got 2,000 people on the waiting list for social housing. A large number of them are waiting for bungalows. And what our council are doing is building executive homes on the green belt instead, 13,000 of them. So we would absolutely protect the green belt. What we would want to do first of all is bring empty homes back into use. Sunderland is the 7th highest in the country for empty properties around the city. Something like £384 million worth of property is lying empty under Sunderland Council. They have plans to tackle this, even though analysis says we're lacking 542 affordable homes per year. They intend to build 100 by 2021. This is just not good enough. So Sunderland Greens would want to build affordable social housing after bringing empty homes back into use on brownfield sites as a priority rather than the green belt. We would also want them up to high standards to save on energy bills for the residents, to make sure that carbon emissions are reduced and to help tackle climate change. So housing would be a real priority for the Green Party. We certainly do not see a demand for executive homes in Sunderland. Our population is not as the council have estimated, and local Labour councils themselves have said that their projections are quite fantastic. So it seems that they're more interested in pleasing the developers in allowing them to build profitable homes than they are in serving the people of Sunderland.
Hi there. Right, so we as I say, with the Direct Democracy Party, now anything regarding new housing developments, etc., would have to be put before people. So, for example, if you wanted to build, well, I live in Henley Hall, At the moment in time, there's 3 or 4 developments in the area at the moment. Now we believe that those should be put to the people first to see if they're valid. Obviously, you need to do all your relevant testing, etc., to make sure that the housing would be valid. Also, you would need some degree of social housing as well, which would need to be provided by the council, possibly with the mixed use that you get through Gen 2. But again, we will put all of this to the people via a direct democracy vote as well.
Yeah, so with regards to the decline in population of Sunderland versus the need for housing, what would the Liberal Democrats take beyond that in terms of the city's in decline in terms of population, but there seems to be a lot of estates going up recently, so what's the Liberal Democrat take on that at the moment?
Well, it's far too many executive homes. I mean, you look at Pennywell. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? The plan about executive homes is nonsense. We don't need executive homes. The problem we have is the lack of social homes and the lack of responsibility Gen 2 has for social homes as well. Because if you look at Pennywell, where I came from, they knocked down my house. Are they replacing it? No. They're replacing it with 175 to 200,000 pounds homes, which is apparently connected to employment to the IAMP, which may or may not happen at pace now, we don't know. But the houses, what need to be built in this city is predominantly social housing and then some mixed affordable housing on brownfield sites. Because if you look at Pennywell, look at sites like that where it's been knocked down, they've been laid empty now for about 12 to 15 years, and it's an eyesore on our city, and it needs to be rectified by our social housing provider, as well as our council.
Okay, and Populist Party, in terms of housing for Sunderland, obviously I know you are running for election.
Affordable housing includes social, rented, affordable rented and intermediate housing provided to specified eligible households whose needs are not met by the money-maker market. Building on prime green belt sites for mega profit. We aim to utilise brownfield sites with specific needs for the community, not the elite executive homes that this council is building. The people come first, not profit.
Thank you very much. And obviously, from a Conservative perspective, I know a big ward of yours at the moment is going through a big debate about housing in Fulwell. It's a big topic, so what is the Conservatives aiming to do in 2019 in terms of the housing crisis in Sunderland? What would your take be?
Thank you. Well, Chris mentioned there the housing development in Fulwell at South Bents. There's been a proposal to build just over 60 houses on a field where there has been hundreds and hundreds of protests from local residents who don't want it. I sit on that planning committee, and I was one of the few people, along with Niall Hodson of the Lib Dems and Martin Haswell of the Lib Dems, to vote against it. The Conservatives opposed it, the Lib Dems opposed it, local residents opposed it, but we have a massively Labour-dominated planning committee which pushed through a plan which clearly had no support from local people and which had very clear highways issues, because it's not clear at all how the junction which exists next to the field where these houses are going to be built can handle the traffic from 64 more houses. I voted against it because when people came from Fulwell and spoke to the committee and put their case forward, I thought they were persuasive and I thought we should have listened to them. Labour thought different to that. Where the Conservatives disagree with others on the panel is that we do think there needs to be a strategy for executive housing in Sunderland for a number of reasons. First of all, more executive housing would allow the council tax take to go up, and therefore mean that there wouldn't have to be increases in council tax like the kind that we've seen again this year from the Labour Council. But what's very clear in our policy is that we do not think this should be at the expense of the Greenbelt. The new medical school and the IAMP will create executive jobs, and we want to keep those executives here. It's not just about housing, it's about creating the jobs and the local infrastructure, and it needs to be thought of in terms of a fully rounded plan. That's our proposal. It means listening to people locally, not building on the green belt when people say they don't want it, but acknowledging that we can't just be either for or against executive housing. We have to have a full strategy that keeps people in local jobs local, so that we don't have a situation as we have at the minute where people in executive jobs in the city actually live outside of the city and earn here but pay their council tax to other local authorities other than Sunderland. We want to keep those taxpayers here, but we also recognise that that has to be with the consent of people who live locally already.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mullen. Now, there does seem to be a certain crossover in terms of the Green Party and UKIP policy on focusing on brownfield sites as opposed to greenfield sites. So, Councillor Elvin, what would you say would be the focus for UKIP in the main run-up to the housing crisis in Sunderland? What would your main strategy be for that?
Well, in reality, the UK doesn't have a housing problem. It has a demand problem. And we have to face up to the fact that demand is fueled by the incredible amount of immigration we have each year. And simply put, housing cannot keep up with the demand. And of course, one of the biggest problems we have with the social housing sector is that in recent years, immigrants from the European Union have enjoyed access to social housing in preference to people who have been long on the waiting list, local residents. And that is also the case with asylum seekers and immigrants from other parts of the world. They're given preference over and above the local people. So you have to solve the problem. We have to decrease the demand for housing. When it comes to actually building the houses, we do firmly believe that we should, first of all, use the brownfield sites, and we as a party would offer grants to making sure that the brownfield sites were developed first. We'd also like to increase the supply of housing by identifying long-term dormant land held by local government and local councils. And to ease the problem of building houses quickly in the short term, we would encourage the building of modular housing made by British companies employing British workers, which is inexpensive to build and highly energy efficient.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Elvin. So our next debate topic we'll move on to is transportation in Sunderland. A little synopsis of this is that transport links in the northeast are generally more poor than elsewhere in the country, Sunderland especially. So, if elected, how would you lobby and campaign to establish better road and rail links and better public transport in the area? Glyn, would you like to mention this?
Yeah, so with the Democrats and Veterans Party, the long-term goal would be to resurface and possibly widen suburban roads. In the short term, obviously, we'll be looking to, resurface or repair the damages that are going on through the potholes. We'll look to increase the capacity of the road network, widen main single carriageways to dual carriageways, and concentrate planning to ensure roads are faster flowing. This ensures that commuters will get from A to B quicker and reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality. Now, we will make improvements to local transport infrastructure and increase capacity where necessary to ensure that the transport network is fit for purpose and able to cope with future demand. We will invest in maintaining and improving footpaths and cycle lanes, as well as improving public transport provision for residents and visitors. Now, all infrastructure procurement will, where possible, be purchased from British companies and British high streets. And the high streets and shopping areas should be places where people also spend their social and leisure time, so we will be wanting to provide links into that via public transport as well. We also believe that everybody, where eligible, should be given free public transport travel as well.
Thank you very much. Now, there has been recently money allocated with Sunderland Council for tackling the problem with potholes in the area. Now, in terms of obviously the Conservative opposition, you are the largest opposition within the council, that is a fact. Do you think the Labour Council at the moment have actually done enough to tackle the problem with Sunderland roads in the area? And if not, what do you think a better direction the council should go in would be?
No.
We can agree on that.
Since I was elected last May, I think I get more casework about roads needing resurfacing and potholes than anything else, and I report them time and time again, and people come back to me and say, did you report that? I said, yes, I've reported 5 or 6 times now, and it just doesn't get done. And when it does get done, what they do is they turn up with the cheapest tarmac you can imagine, and they cover it a little bit, and then a bus comes along and it breaks up, and in one recent case a bit of the tarmac flew and smashed somebody's window opposite the Barnes pub. So what they do is they used a cheap fix rather than having a proper solution. But Chris was right in saying that Chris Grayling, the Transport Secretary, has allocated a pot for repair fund. This council has benefited from it enormously. In fact, when you look down the margin of Graham Miller's budget, pretty much every other entry is Department for Transport, Department for Transport, Department for Transport. The reality is that the Conservative government, since it came into power with the Liberal Democrats in 2010 and subsequently on our own since 2015 and even more on our own since 2017, has invested more in Sunderland in terms of transport infrastructure than Labour did in 13 years. It was the Conservatives that paid for the new bridge and the road surrounding that. It's the Conservatives that have paid for the new highways leading into the city centre. It's the Conservatives that have put money into fixing potholes. That is just a fact. Labour has not made that investment. But this council, even in spite of receiving all of that government money, still somehow manages to get it wrong.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Elvin, I know your area of Hetton, it is certainly a more rural area than the main city centre we are in. So in terms of UKIP, have you faced many challenges in kind of transport and kind of improving transport links and potholes and quality of the road in the area?
Yeah, we do. Excuse me, yes, we do, just like everybody else. But it's interesting how all the roads that get repaired each year are the ones outside Labour councillors' houses. And that's the fact. They resurfaced the road I live on last year, and it stopped just before my house. When it comes to transport, one of the biggest problems with transport is that the North East is at the bottom of the list of all regions in the UK when it comes to receiving money from the central government for infrastructure projects. And we even get less money than the southwest of England, which is pretty incredible. I mean, if you take, for instance, that the population, the people of London get £200 per head more for infrastructure than we do here in the North East. Is there any wonder that we have an ageing and failing transportation system? One of the big areas that we're very keen on doing is reusing many of the old railway lines which are still in place, and there's absolutely no reason why they cannot be brought back into use at a relatively cheap price. And you will see when our manifesto comes out for our North of Tyne mayoral candidate, we have a very innovative system and a very inexpensive system for reusing these old railway lines to assist in transporting people around the area. But as I say, you'll have to wait till the manifesto comes out. I'm not allowed to talk about it tonight. Yes, it's a great problem. It's a lack of money, but also it's how the administration spend the money. I mean, since we took over control of our humble town council, the amount of money we have saved, the waste we've eliminated, and the amount of money we've now been able to plough back into good causes, the same thing would happen at the council level if you had the right people in charge. And that's what it is. There is money there, but it's been badly used and misspent.
So is it the case of poor leadership and plenty of funds, or is it the case of the leadership in the council is good but there's not enough funds? Green Party.
Money go missing for it.
Yes.
Right, well, we think it's a bit of both, really. The North East is starved of funds when it comes to public transportation, and obviously public transportation is a cause that's very close to the Green Heart. We often use this as a way to demonstrate how we can make our lives better, our quality of life better, while cutting our carbon emissions. If we had a fully integrated, affordable, reliable public transport system, then you wouldn't need to sit in traffic jams, breathing fumes on the way to work and getting angry every day. You wouldn't arrive stressed. You wouldn't have to look for parking and pay for parking, and then do the whole thing in reverse on the way home. Now, when it comes to roads, the potholes are a disgrace. Certainly around my way, they're down to the cobbles. And I often say to my son as we bounce along in the pram that the council are intent on giving him an authentic experience as a Victorian baby. But he doesn't seem to appreciate this as he rattles around. So yes, certainly we need to repair the potholes and we need to repair them competently. But we wouldn't be going in for widening roads and extending those roads. Again, we would have to agree with UKIP that we would be bringing the old railway lines back into operation. We would like to extend the metro, certainly out to Doxford International, and out to Horton, out to Washington, and perhaps out to Seaham eventually as well. We think that would be a much better way to get around. It would cut air pollution and carbon emissions. What we would really like to see, which is happening in many other cities in the world, is a no-car city centre with underground car parking on the city centres, free underground car parking on the city centres. This has happened in other cities of our size, and what's happened is people have moved there. The city of Valparaiso in Spain, I'm sure the locals don't pronounce it like that, have actually found that their population has gone up by 12,000. People are healthier, their quality of life has improved. Children can cross the roads, the elderly can get around much easier, and small businesses are thriving. So we think this is the way forward. Leicester is already putting plans in place for this. The cities of Oslo, Hamburg, Mexico are all way ahead of Britain on these things. So these are our visions for the transportation. We think we can make a better life for ourselves, as well as improving health and cutting carbon emissions.
Now, from a Populist Party standpoint, a big issue that I believe you've been addressing in your last election was the cost of parking in the city centre. It's been said that we do have a very costly charges for parking in the city centre, and some people do cite that as being quite unfair and dissuading people from parking in the city. There's certain nearby cities where it is free parking, so what would the Populists be able to do with regards to city centre parking and just parking in the city in general?
That what I did was I put forward that 2 days out of the week would be free parking, not just from 3 o'clock onwards, but all day on a Tuesday and all day on a Thursday. There again, I'm not a councillor, but the road outside of our house has been relayed after years and years of flooding. I was even given a sign to put out when the floods came by the council. And we believe in clean air, safe roads. We support any non-pollutant form of public transport, underground railways, monorails, electric motors and trams, cycle routes as an alternative to the excessive use of fossil fuels. This is best achieved under public ownership. Public transport should be affordable, safe, clean and crime-free if the community is expected to use it.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, so that concludes transportation. Our next topic coming up is a big one. It's a contentious one, council spending. Council spending is an issue which residents have concerns over. It's a nice big one. How better would you spend taxpayers' money if elected? Glyn, what would you like to start?
So, it is a big contentious issue, council spending, especially at the moment. I mean, there is money there to be spent. There is money wasted. It's massive in Sunderland Council. You know, as far as spending goes, it should be spent on like I say, with the roads, some more social housing. We do waste the money on, to a degree. Some people say the air show does bring money in, but how much does it cost at the end of the day as well? The likes of the tall ships race, again, I don't know exactly what the figures were.
It went over budget by £9 million.
There we go.
An absolute disgrace. It was really what was it? They literally when they were
It's all right.
I sit on that committee. When they were envisioning the tall ships, they said they would bring in about £9 million worth of sponsorship. Does anyone care to guess how much sponsorship they got? It's zero. It was zero. They gave away sponsorship. They gave away sponsorship to Hayes and to other companies, which is an absolute disgrace.
How do you give sponsorship away?
We were giving away sponsorship.
So is it a case of the council spending, or is it more council savings? And I know recently the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats voted against voted for the council to scrap the meals that the councils are getting. It's a big issue. A lot of us, obviously, we're seeing a lot of cuts happening. Meanwhile, it seems like certain councils in the civic centre are enjoying taxpayer-funded meals. So, Anthony, you were one of the people who voted against that, is that right? Why don't you tell me why you voted against that?
Thank you. Well, as a natural Conservative, I think spend taxpayers' money is quite a dirty phrase. I think we shouldn't be spending taxpayers' money in the way that this Labour Council does, because it does tend to be on themselves. The free meals being a part of that. Graham Miller, the Labour leader, talks about it as if it's some kind of moral defence of the poor people sitting among them who can't afford to eat and they've been out working all day. When you look at them, they're about 80-year-olds. They haven't been out working all day. They're all retired. And some of them, the chairman of area committees, for example, are taking so much in allowances. They're better off chairing one of those committees than they are working a full-time national minimum wage job. It's morally indefensible. And yet the Labour Party somehow still manages to defend it. So what we have set out in our manifesto is to reduce councillors' allowances, particularly those who are getting the special responsibility allowances, and unfortunately we did include Stevens in that.
I voted for it.
He did vote for it, in fairness. To get rid of the chairs and the vice chairs and the deputy chairs and the sub-chairs and all of the other varieties of chairs of committees who should not be being paid for jobs that councillors should be expected to undertake. We do not need special responsibility allowances to turn up to a meeting and to sit there and say, right, who's next? We just do not need to pay people for that. We would end the free meals, as Chris has already said. We would scrap the deputy cabinet members because they don't deputise, and what the Conservatives support, although the council can't do this itself, we support the independent body that makes the decision, reducing the number of councillors per ward from 3 to 2.
Thank you. Tony, I know in your campaign last year, you were the only one, I think, who was actually saying that all councillors should pay for their own food, pay for their own drinks, the public servants. Do you think that Sunderland Council could do more in terms of promoting that spirit? And what would your approach be if you were elected as a councillor?
As in we had the councillors were waving the lunch boxes when the vote went. The Labour councillors were waving the lunch boxes to agree to carry on getting the free meals. As for other expenditures, we had a meeting with the then CEO of the council asking why they supported a known paedophile to the tune of £50,000 one year and £70,000 the next year. 2 weeks later, the same CEO, who originally came from Rotherham, was gone with a gagging order of £364,000. The gagging orders has cost the council upwards of £56 million. Was this necessary if openness and transparency was in place? Figures for the new civic centre range from £40 to £80 million. It was announced in the paper this morning was £60 million. for a monstrosity of a building with no character whatsoever. Is this needed? All this and more from our council tax payments.
Rachel, a monstrosity of a building, a waste of £61 million taxpayers' money, as Tony's thoughts. What's your thoughts on that?
Every time we drive past the Vaux site, my partner has to put his hand out and go, no, because he knows I'm about to go into a rant about the building that they've already put there, which I consider to be an absolute eyesore. It's taken 20 years to get it. Whether they'll ever fill it is another matter. And now, as Tony says, to propose spending between 40 and 80 million on a civic centre on that site is unbelievable. And, you know, we've got a lovely riverside there to be developed. It's like they've never been to another city. They're going to put council offices on the riverside and they're going to spend our money to do it. It's an absolute disgrace. Now, it's undoubted that central government cuts have had an impact on the way councils can spend their money, but other places have managed without letting down people in the city as badly as Sunderland City Council have. They've been innovative, they've been imaginative in the way they've spent their money, and they've made savings. So we would absolutely agree with the other people on the panel. We would like to see a reduction in the number of councillors as well. The average around the UK is about 53 councillors on a council. Some places in the rest of Europe and Scandinavia manage with as few as 30 for cities of Sunderland's size. So that would be a huge saving straight away on their expenses, on the special responsibility allowances and so on. The wages of our CEO are higher than the Prime Minister's and £10,000 more than the CEO of Newcastle City Council. How this can be justified, I don't know. We'd like to see them cutting the subsidies for empty homes before they raise council tax. They're currently subsidised for the first 6 months, 12 months if you're doing some repairs on them. We'd also like to see them doing, as I say, something innovative, something imaginative, and something that Green councillors have promoted in the rest of the country is them investing their local government pension funds in the cities that they represent. So they've purchased renewable energy supplies that brings revenue back to the council. They've invested in housing, which brings revenue back to the council. And they've supported small businesses, which brings revenue back to the council. So these are all things that the council could be doing to both save money and to make themselves money in the future.
Thank you. Richard Elvin, UKIP did once run a council, Thurrock Council, and objectively they did a very good job of it. They helped put through certain tax cuts on local council tax and help improve services. So do you think that attitude could be replicated within Sunderland Council, and do you think that the time is right to put a freeze on council tax and not rise it?
Yes, I absolutely do think it should be replicated in Sunderland, and it would appear that most of the panel also agree with that, and I agree with most of what the panel has said. You always have to cut the cloth to suit, but the problem with Sunderland Labour Party is they're profligate with other people's money. They're not so profligate when it's their own they're spending. They don't mind spending other people's money and wasting it. And they seem to have no concept of the value of other people's money. I mean, just an example, our mayor had her mayoral due last weekend, and for the first time in living memory, we didn't make a huge loss on it. We did something which was good for the public, good for the residents. It made a profit for 2 charities and didn't cost the ratepayers anything. That's the head ratepayers. Because normally it's just a shindig for the chain gang, as they call themselves, going from each other's one meeting to the next. But the thing that was, excuse me, the most scandalous thing about the event, there was a great big limousine in the car park with a chauffeur who had brought the deputy mayor and his wife to attend the event. I mean, it's totally unnecessary. I mean, that's just one small example of the waste. Basically, the council hasn't got a clue, and it has, like my own council, never had a balanced budget in 43 years until we produced one. It's all about tax and spend, because it's other people's money. And It's basically just not good enough, and we need to get rid of these sort of people and put people in charge who are careful with people's money, spend it wisely and spend it on the things that the general public want it spent on.
Okay, Richard Eltham, thank you very much. So that concludes our topic of council spending, unless anyone has any thoughts. Okay. Our next one is policing, crime and fly tipping. That's another big topic for the area. A little intro of that. So there's been a big problem with crime. Some would even say there's been a bit of a crime wave in Sunderland, antisocial behaviour and whatnot. But also as well, a big thing about fly tipping lately, it's really running some areas down. So if elected, what would your party do to combat crime locally with particular issue of fly tipping? I think I'll put this to Councillor Mullen.
Thank you. Well, we sent Councillor Peter Wood out on a night to tackle criminals in his Batman costume. Fly tipping is a major issue, but I'll just give you some stats on the council's enforcement policy. In the 2017-18 year, the council only enforced penalty notices for 35 instances of fly tipping. There have been more instances of fly tipping in my ward alone over the last year. So the council does not take a proactive stance on this. Similarly, 14 fines for littering. This is across the entire city, across the entire year. And who wants to guess how many there were for dog fouling? There was one. One dog shit was punished. That's not enough.
Oh, I know who it was. It was Gandalf. Who got one.
She was the one. But there should be more like her, because it happens all of the time. People complain, they highlight the problems, I report them, other councillors report them, and it just seems like the council doesn't care. So we need a much more proactive stance. What the Conservatives have proposed this year, as well as in previous years, is that we have an arm's length independent body which actually has enforcement staff who go out and proactively look for the people who commit these offences and issue the fines and generate a revenue from it, so that crime in a sense does pay, but it pays the people who have suffered the consequences of having somebody's dog making a mess outside of their streets or a random fridge in their back lane.
Thank you. Now, an old saying is the best way to fight crime is to deter it, so it doesn't take place in the first place. Tony, I know you had a certain kind of method of trying to deter people from doing fly tipping in the future. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I think there should be stiffer penalties by issuing notices of between £500 and £1,000, as well as a vehicle seizure. Those who are caught in the act of fly tipping anything from old fridges, sofas, garden waste, rubble, black bags with household rubbish, then I would like to see them be named and shamed on posters throughout the city.
Now, obviously the Green Party, a big issue is environmentalism and protecting the environment. Obviously fly tipping, that's one of the worst things you can do to the environment, especially many of the fields near where I live, Foxcover Lane, there's a lot of fly tipping goes on there. So in the Green Party, have you had much of a push towards any creative ideas out there to tackle fly tipping in the area?
We have. I mean, Sunderland is really bad for fly tipping. We have 4 times as many incidents as Middlesbrough, for instance. We are right up at the top of the league. And it doesn't seem that threats of fining or enforcement orders are doing much to stop that. We had one of our council candidates was out recently talking to people, and they found an elderly man. He'd been given a new sofa by a charity, and his old sofa was sat in the front garden because he had no way to get rid of it. He didn't have access to a van. When he was saying, what can I do with this? Set it on fire, cut it up into little bits and put it in the bins week by week. What am I actually supposed to do with this? And that's because our council doesn't have any mechanism for people to get rid of large items of waste. So it costs them, and this person and many others don't actually have the money to do it. So what we would do, which has been successful in other cities, is you allow people to have a certain number of free collections, which we used to have here, and the fly tipping was a lot less. You have certain collection points where people can drop it off quite near to them so that it can be collected on a weekly basis by the council. And most of all, you reuse and you recycle more. We're sending so much waste to landfill in this city, and it's costing us an absolute fortune. We have one of the lowest rates for recycling in the region, and we've asked many questions about this in the council sessions. They won't even commit to being average for recycling in this city. So really, this is a problem that needs to be tackled for the environment, for people's pleasant environment to live in, and also so that people can dispose of major items of waste easily and cheaply.
Thank you. Just a reminder, we will have a full Q&A at the end, so if you want to ask up, more than welcome. So there we have it, 4 times as much fly tipping in Sunderland and Middlesbrough, one of our nearest towns. So in terms of waste crime, what would the Democrats and Veterans Party strategy be for that?
Yeah, so I see fly tipping almost on a daily basis where I live in Henley Hall. Whenever I walk my dog, there's something new dumped, particularly along the old lines between the old railway line between Hetton and Piddington. They are locked. There's too easy access for the fly tippers to get down there in the vans. Just cut the locks off, so there's no deterrent. Now, you know, what we would look to do would be to encourage local authorities to set up and run effective anti-fly tipping partnerships, again, with independent people if possible. You know, we would also strengthen intelligence sharing and engagement to tackle illegal activity. Now, it's not hard to go and find somebody who will dump some stuff for you. So if effectively, I could go tonight onto social media, say to somebody, I need some rubbish picking up. There's no guarantees that person's then going to go pick the rubbish up and take it to the tip. So there needs to be more highly regulated as far as that goes from the people. I mean, a lot of people, they get a pickup truck, they get themselves a license, and then they call themselves waste men. And half the time it just gets dumped on the doorsteps. On the golf course is another place where there's constant rubbish tipped all the time. And so, you know, we would encourage the tougher penalties, like Tony said, take their vehicles away from them if necessary as well.
Thank you. Richard Elvin, I know you're a fellow Hetton Hall resident yourself, or Houghton Spring. So do you notice a big trend of fly tipping in that area as well? And if so, what do you think should be done about it from a UKIP perspective?
Yeah, there is a huge amount of fly tipping. It's one of my pet hates. Well, littering generally is. Well, when it comes to littering, that specific point, for years, ever since I've been on the council in Hetton, I've been pressing Sunderland City Council through Hetton Town Council to have litter enforcement officers. Legislation was passed a number of years ago that councils could employ people to issue fixed penalties for dropping litter. And I personally think it's a good idea, and if some of these people were given a fixed penalty, and subsequently maybe they were named and shamed in the newspapers, we might begin to end the problem. But it is an endemic problem, and I think there's another thing which needs to be discussed is who has the right to take rubbish to the council facilities. If you have a van, obviously you can't take it. It has to be in a car unless you have a licence. Maybe there's a very good case for opening these facilities up and saying to people, well, don't tip them, just come and put it in the council facility. Because the council has a legal responsibility. If you see a fridge on the side of the road and you report it to the council, they have a legal responsibility to come and collect it. Now, that must be hugely expensive to have a team of people just driving around in flash Land Rover convertibles to picking up these fridges and etc. If the people didn't put it there in the first place, I think it might be a lot more cost effective. But going to the other point of the policing, there's not been a Royal Commission into Policing since 1962, and I think we need, as a nation, to look at all of our policing policy. And I think we need to look at financing the police forces nationwide, not just in Sunderland. correctly. When you imagine the budget for the policing in the UK is £7.3 billion, and yet we give £14.5 billion away in overseas aid. That sort of doesn't compute to me. I think we need to have a police force that's properly funded, and the police officers are properly rewarded, and we need greater numbers of police officers. And yeah, why not? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. And the other thing which we need to do with as far as policing is to scrap this stupid system of police and crime commissioners, which costs us all an absolute fortune. It's just another layer of government and jobs for the boys. I mean, you'll notice that good old Dame Vera Bird increased her precept, I think this year, was it by 21%? That's just for her budget, for her jaunts and whatever she does or doesn't do. I think last year it was 17%. I mean, that's just a precept for a figurehead who does absolutely nothing. And when you talk about democracy and accountability, 4 years ago I had a letter from our Police and Crime Commission to say that she would come and talk to the people of Hetton. And for 4 years she was reneged on that. She refuses to come because she knows she's going to get a hard time, I'm sure. But it's interesting how, on our budget, at our expense, she can come around Hetton, make a film at huge expense to promote Bridget Phillipson to become the MP at the next election. There is so much waste and so much misspent money. It's about time it was all got stopped.
Thank you. Now, Councillor O'Brien, I know your colleague Niall in Millfield, he's been doing a lot of work about backlane, fly tipping and things like this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Lib Dems have done in that particular area, what it was like before, what they've done, and whether there still is more that needs to be done in the area.
So Niall has created, or the residents have created, a much more stable cohesive group which will go round and patrol the back lanes and try and clamp down on individuals who decided upon themselves to dump their, I'm trying to not swear, but to dump their poo all over the place. The Lib Dems on the council have tried to introduce a system of where a means tested collection could happen. So if you're poor and you can't afford it, or you're elderly and you're on a pension, you get it for free. The Labour Council decided to vote that down. We've also tried to, like the Conservatives, tried to introduce a dog warden scheme where it'd be an arm's length company where you actually fine people for letting their dogs dirt all over the place, because dog muck's actually highly dangerous to children, and it's just irresponsible for the council to allow this problem to get bigger and to get much more out of control than it already is, because it's out of control. If you go up a road in my ward, for instance, I forget what you call it, Goldsmith Road, it is just littered with dog shit. It's seriously just littered with it, and it's just unacceptable. You cannot walk 3 meters without seeing this, and the Graham Miller or whomever runs that portfolio is just not listening. They're putting money into stupid things and not actually putting enough funding into our city services.
Councillor O'Brien, thank you. Okay, so that finishes our topic on police and crime and fly tipping. Now, our next topic we've got is health and environment. Now, the Royal Society for Public Health, in a survey of 70 plus towns, rated Sunderland as the 5th most unhealthy town in all of the UK. So there we go. So what can be done to improve the public health of Sunderland? And it is noteworthy that this covers physical and mental health, so it covers all aspects of health. So Glyn, what would the DVP's policy be on improving the health of the city?
Yeah, so Now, last year, the NHS had to perform over 43,000 operations. That's about 170 a day to remove teeth in children and teenagers in hospital. So, you do have an education programme that needs to go on around that, which needs to be publicly encouraged in schools. We'll work with the health and voluntary community sector to improve the health and well-being of children and young people. Issues such as mental health, obesity, healthy eating and oral education through effective early years programmes. Now, we also do believe that parks and open spaces can play a major role in the health of young people particularly. Again, that needs to be something that needs to be addressed at early years. Sport, it needs to be encouraged more in schools, competitive sports particularly as well. The more, in today's society, there seems to be, lessened down competition. So we would actively encourage competition in sports, gets people more active, gets people more healthy. You do have to, in the parks area, there was a recent report found that 92% of local authority park departments have experienced budget cuts. In the past 3 years, and between 2014 and 2016, a total of 214 playgrounds were closed by 65 local authorities across the UK, and those are facts that can be checked online by going to play.org news events, so those are verifiable facts. Parks also, not just for public health, in physical health, they can be a focal point for communities as well. So you can bring communities together by having parks and open spaces as well, and encourage people to come together to talk and make sure that the parks have enough places for young children to exercise, and as well as older people as well. You've got those, more of those outdoor gym type things that you see in some places. Admittedly, you've got to make sure they're not vandalised, but they can all be used to make things better and create a more healthy environment as well for people.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Mullen, obviously we heard it there that you've got your open spaces. A lot of people think they're good for mental health, a lot of good places to walk your dog, feel out in the open, get away from the concrete jungle. Now, I know recently with the development down near South Bents, that was one of the things cited in the report about the people on South Bents enjoying the nice view of the area, but with the new housing development, it might affect that. So, what will the Conservatives' take on that be in regards to the health of the city?
Thank you. Well, I did already address this earlier, and I said I voted against it. So rather than go over that, I think if that's all right, I'll leave that there. I might make myself slightly unpopular on this question because I have a slightly libertarian view on this. I think if you want to go out and spend your money on pizza and sugar, I think you should be allowed to do that without the government saying to you, you can't do that, you're too fat, your teeth are falling out, we know best. We'll tell you how to spend your money. I think people should ultimately be allowed to spend their money in the way that they choose and consume what they want and have a degree of independence in looking after themselves. But what we can do to help people who want to live healthier lifestyles and make our city a more environmentally friendly place to live is to ensure that we do protect parks and green spaces. And one of the things that the Conservatives have proposed in our manifesto is to actually introduce 5 park and cemetery wardens who would go around the parks on a night locking and securing them, not just making sure that they're places that are kept free from antisocial behaviour and vandalism, but ensuring that antisocial behaviour and more serious crimes that have occurred in recent years, well in recent months in fact, like arson and rape, don't occur. It would help if the council would respond to my numerous emails about why the aquatic centre seems to constantly be in some kind of disrepair, but they are very secretive about that. If we're going to provide leisure facilities for people to keep fit, and the council is going to have an arm's length body working for it as it does with everyone active, then there should be a degree of transparency in what the problems are, because it seems like either the roof is broken or the swimming pool isn't working, and they are just not willing to answer questions about why that is. And the final point is that the Conservatives support Michael Gove's introduction of new funds from the Department of the Environment to bring back weekly green bin collections. In my ward, people, as across the city, get their bin emptied once a fortnight, and you see them pulling them out on Wednesday morning where I live, and they're just overflowing, and the rubbish blows into the street, and the streets become littered, and that has caused increased problems with rats, for example. So weekly bin collections will help to tackle the kind of litter that is causing these kind of health problems. And the Conservatives, for all I believe, you should have your own independent choices to make, do have a well-rounded policy on the environment which will help people live healthier lives should they wish to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mullen. Now, Councillor O'Brien, I know you had a take on the sugar tax introduced by this government recently, trying to stop the damage of sugar to people's teeth and such. Now, I know this is a local debate, but I know it was mentioned in one council meeting about trying to stop the number of takeaways that are in the town. There's quite a lot of takeaways in the city centre, right near schools as well, which is not good for the young people. So what would the Liberal Democrats' take be on that at the moment?
So I'll give you my personal view on this. I was 16 stone, believe it or not, about 2 years ago. I lost my weight because I thought it would be healthier for me, and it's healthier for me. But I agree with Anthony, actually. The sugar tax is a Liberal mechanism which tries to force an individual down a path which they wouldn't do under their own free will. And as a Liberal, that sits unwell with me. However, what the council can do is they can try and maintain a reasonable level of takeaways being situated in one area. If you look at St Luke's, is it St Luke's Terrace, St Luke's Road? Yeah, St Luke's Terrace, there's about, I don't know, about over 10 takeaways, 13 takeaways there. It seems unnecessary to me. And that sort of thing's actually destroyed the sense of a shopping high street there. And it's a bit of a shame that, because you need to have a mixed economy as well as giving people the individual rights and freedoms to choose what they want to do. And the Lib Dems would make sure that a certain amount of spaces would be taken away from takeaway or new applicants for takeaways, especially on that St Luke's Road and other such roads what has a high density population of takeaways.
Thank you very much. Councillor Elvin, I know it was once a UKIP policy to essentially let pubs decide on whether they'd like people to smoke in them, whether they would like to have certain areas, or whether it should just be banned altogether. I know that was once a UKIP policy, but with that in mind, in terms of Sunderland pubs, we obviously have a lot of pubs in Sunderland. Do you think that should be something that we should leave to the landlords, or do you think that should be, what would your thoughts be on that?
Well, as a non-smoker, I never agreed with that policy, and I still think it was a bad policy, so there you go. But there is a demand, unfortunately, for people to smoke, and most pubs do create a smoking area. Some are inside, some are outside. So I think that satisfies the demands of all sections of society when at least they have the facility to smoke if they so wish. When it comes back to the general health of the community, we do have a problem with our health service. It is really in crisis, through lack of funding and money being spent inefficiently. PFI contracts, which were started by the Conservatives and then enhanced by the Labour Party, are bleeding the coffers of the health service. And also, our health service has to contend with being a world health service as well. The number of people that we have to choose to treat at our expense, and which is ultimately the expense of the local residents because of their waiting times and the standard of service they get. So we obviously need to fund our health services to look after our citizens. When it comes to sort of personal health, I agree with many of the panel here. We should promote and build more open spaces and playgrounds for children. And it's interesting how this council doesn't use its Section 106 powers as it should. there is an estate behind where I live which has planning permission for 300 houses, and the Section 106 agreement stated that after the first 80 houses were built and occupied, then the play park should be made available for the children. And guess what? All the houses have been finished and the play park hasn't even been started. So why isn't the council enforcing their own restrictions on these developers who are, obviously making shed loads of money out of these executive housings? And we should have more of these parks, and they should be placed in the centre of these developments. The one that we're going to get from this housing estate is right out in the far corner. It's not exactly going to encourage the kids who live in the other opposite side of the park to the estate to go to it. So we need some joined up thinking with the councillors and with and some enforcement of the law of the rules that they have in place. And as far as another thing with environment, I would also like to agree with Rachel on something she made earlier in the evening. She's talked about in city centres, especially in Spain and in many places in Europe, all the car parking is underground in the centre of the town. I do a lot of work in Spain, and wherever I go, what was say a little bit of a park area, they just dig it up, stick a 15-storey car park underground, then put it all back, make a nice play park in the centre of the town. The traffic comes in, parks its car, it's off the roads. As Rachel says, all the shops and everything benefit, and all the children benefit. In a country like Spain, they have play areas everywhere for the children. The children are always out playing. In my own town, we have very few. There's nothing. There's no opportunity to get out into the fresh air and get some exercise and keep fit. So many things need doing. It just needs some joined up thinking and some people with actually a couple of brain cells between their ears who work on the council.
Thank you. Now, Green Party in Sunderland, in terms of helping just improve the general health of the city, there was another bad statistic that said Sunderland has the most antidepressant prescriptions in the northeast. It's not a good symptom or whatever's going on. So what do you think could be done from the Greens to try and improve the physical and mental health of the city and just try and reverse the trend? What would you say?
Yes, we do have an appalling rate of antidepressant prescriptions in this city as people's mental health has been suffering, and part of that is despair at the general economic picture, and part of that is the cuts to services that we've seen over the last 10 years. Certainly to young people's health services like CAMS, the waiting lists for them have gone up and up and up, and we've seen young people really suffering. So we'd like to see the health service funded properly. We'd like to see young people's services funded properly. We'd also like to preserve the green spaces in our city so that people can get exercise, can relax and enjoy themselves. One of the playing fields in Washington is being built on now. It's widely used by the local football clubs. That's going to be a lost opportunity for exercise. It's more executive homes, of course. There are things like, the infrastructure needs to improve, and instead it seems to be getting worse. So we've seen the merger of the local hospital trusts, South Tyneside and Sunderland, which the Green Party opposed. But it went ahead anyway, and that has meant that some people have to take 2 buses in order to access health services. If you're not well, if you're elderly, if you're on a low income, that's really difficult and it can exacerbate people's health problems. So things like funding local services for everyone. We're also concerned, of course, about air pollution, which is killing 40,000 people a year in the UK and costing a fortune in terms of lost days off work, health services for people, and the grief of many families and inconvenience. And really, climate change, obviously I'm going to say, is the greatest risk to all of our health. We have terrible rising air pollution problems. We have a risk of higher disease in more humid and sultry weather. And more importantly for the northeast, we have colder weather expected, because what climate change means is more extreme weather. It doesn't mean we'll just keep getting warmer. it means we will have more extreme weather events, which means longer, worse cold snaps. Now, we already have 200 elderly people dying across Sunderland each year because it's too cold in their homes. They're not insulated properly, they can't afford the energy bills. That is going to get worse as climate change intensifies. So we were very pleased that the City Council decided to declare a climate emergency this week. We've been pushing for this for some months, and we were pleased that the Conservative Party actually took that forward. We had contacted the other parties in the city who had not been interested in taking that forward. And they've also pledged that they will put into place, in any impact assessment they do, a carbon cost, which again was something that we have been pushing for. So we really need to tackle climate change, we need to preserve our green spaces, and we need to fund our local services properly. As far as I know, we're the only party that's been arguing consistently against HS2. We've said it's a waste of money right from the start. It's going to cost us billions, and we all know that with government projects they always go over, so it's already estimated in the billions. It's going to go over, it's destroying wildlife, and it's going to cut a tiny part of the journey off between some southern cities. It's not going to come up here, not for the foreseeable future. And in the meantime, we have no investment in our rail transport. So this Hyperloop sounds absolutely fantastic. So yes, scrap HS2, get that up here instead. And what we've noticed with things like the Northern Powerhouses, they keep talking about the North as if it stops at Sheffield. There's nothing between Sheffield and Scotland in our government's plans. So yes, we need that to put us on the map. We'd very much welcome that.
Thanks for the question. Fellow at the front here, he had his hand up second, so I'll go for it. Sorry, Colin, just this fellow at the front here. Yeah, thanks. Just whoever comes in first, we've got a lot of questions.
What would you say about the mentally ill who were left to fend for themselves in Sunderland and round about? There was a lady who was murdered in Sea Road by somebody who was seriously mentally ill, who looked as if he'd been fending for himself. And I live in Millfield, and there were two men living at separate addresses who were mentally ill and on drugs. So how they affect other people is they need the money for the drugs, then they go robbing people during the day and the night. And I think this is because the mentally ill are being left to fend for themselves.
So is your question, what could be done about mentally ill and drug use? Okay. Anyone want to comment on that? Richard, do you want to comment on that?
Mental illness is a terrible thing, and regrettably it is so underfunded, it's untrue. And I think we all recognise that much more needs to be done to cater for those who are mentally ill. Again, it all comes down to money, and it comes down to what money you have, how you allocate it, whether you allocate it wisely or whether you spend it carelessly, as they certainly do in Sunderland. But it is a problem, and it's a growing problem, and it's one we need to address really sooner rather than later. But yes, we do need to put a lot more effort into looking after the mentally ill people.
Councillor Elvin, thank you. Just a gentleman over there, please, just beyond. Who's the question for?
Question for Rachel. South Tyneside Council have an excellent recycling village, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. I've seen it in detail. I know there's been discussion for quite some time, possibly in conjunction with other local authorities, of suddenly coming up with a new facility. I just wondered if you could update us, please, if you know any progress.
We've become a bit of a waste expert party in Sunderland, and we've been submitting questions for the last few months, actually, since the Lib Dems very kindly got permission for public to ask questions in the council, and we've had no such commitments from Sunderland City Council to establish it. In fact, as I said earlier, we are one of the lowest rates for recycling in the North East, in the whole country in fact. We spend a fortune sending waste to landfill, and we've asked them to commit to just come up to the average, and they have refused to do that. If you look on their website about recycling, all it says on their page is, please recycle more. No advice about how to do it, no advice about how to sort it. So people are confused about how to sort out their recycling from the rest of the rubbish. A village like that would really help people, and no, as far as we know, there is nothing on the cards for that, which is a shame.
Gentleman right at the back in the grey top, just on the right there. Yeah.
Just to come back on that point.
So the question's for Rachel, yeah?
Yeah, it's really
nice.
I'm led to believe that the Rolls-Royce site at Pallion's going to be in your waste recycling centre. Is that not true?
We'd certainly welcome that, but they haven't, as I say, we've asked questions about it in the council, and they haven't responded. But perhaps the councillor could.
I think that's true.
The people who are running the tip down at
B Street.
B Street, they believe they know it's true.
I'm about 80. I think I'm about 80% sure it's moving to Pallion because my colleague Martin is a bit concerned about it.
It's the bridge.
So we've heard that it's moving to Hendon. Your colleague is 80% sure that it's moving to Pallion. This is a terrible muddle.
Yeah, I think it is moving to ex-Rose Road site.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to create more problems on the road.
Alright, thank you very much. Gentleman at the front there.
This is very convenient. 2 points really.
Who's your question for? Is this for
the whole panel?
Whole panel, right.
2 points really, one specific and one more broad. But the first point is speaking to someone that's had significant insight to Sunderland Children's Services. And to be honest with you, it's a hugely complex area and it isn't going to be resolved overnight. So we need to take that into account. The other thing, it's been removed from direct council control. So it's a bit broad really to say that the council's at fault here because there's been no improvement even under the new management system. So that's going to take some thinking through. So what's the panel's response to that?
So just to double check, your question is just what's... Okay, so children's services. Anyone want to come in on that? Anyone want to come in on that? So just to double check, what's the actual specific question?
The question is, what is the strategy?
Right. So
the parties, if you like, or from the panel generally, to address the complex issues currently being experienced by some of the children's services.
Okay, so the strategy to address the issue of children's services. Anyone want to come in on that? Anyone in particular?
I'll try and answer that because, as you say, it's a really complex issue. I think the major mistake, what actually the council did, was to allow children's services to go off to. Well, they could have lobbied the government.
No. I was there at the time. I had no choice.
Put it this way: they shouldn't have got it into that state in the first place to allow that to happen. What could happen now is that the council can try and mould children's services into a better thing. As you say, it won't happen overnight. It needs much more expertise than I can give because I'm no expert in this subject. It needs people. I don't know if you can. If you have any expertise in it, anything like that, because it's really important that us as councillors, we understand.
I understand that, but I don't want people in the audience to go off tonight and just think it's an easy solution.
Oh no, it's no. There's no easy solution to this. The first step to this is to try and get permanent staff, permanent social services staff, and I think that's an important step. It is not going to happen overnight. It'll probably be in 10 to 15 years that we will completely improve it.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry. Can I ask you a question?
Okay, well, it's going to be what that's Lydia. I'll come to you next. Is that all right?
It's so complex.
It's a complex.
Why is it so complex? You have a chance for a problem.
It's going to move on to this lady here. She's had a hand up for a little while. Just a lady here with a question. So there we go. It's good.
Sorry, I didn't get a chance to bring in the broader issue if I may.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Yeah.
What would that be?
Well, what's been illuminated tonight is the fact that every individual on that panel, right, has been able to demonstrate significant insight to the issues and potential solutions. The concern is if you really want to break the stranglehold of the Labour Party in this area, then you really need to think more collectively.
No, I agree.
So, is it not time now to take out party politics from local government elections?
Okay, we are just going to, I hear it says, just, I've got a lot of questions, that's all. So there's a lady who's had her hand up for an awful long time. So lady there with the scarf there, please. Thanks very much.
Hi, it's about fly tipping. It's to everyone. This is a true story. I notified the council I needed rubbish removed, and so I pleaded. And at the time I had my benefit cut, so it was quite difficult. Now, I live in a block of 4. We have our own entrances. I live on the north side of the river. And I put it down Yellowby out the side. On the day the council was coming to get it, Gently's van arrived and started taking the rubbish. So I ran out and said, can you tell me why you are taking this? Oh, we've been told you're fly tipping. I saw the report form, housing officer said, fly tipping. Now, a year later, my tenants put their rubbish out, lay there for 3 months. I contacted Jenny said, well, we can't do anything about it. I contacted the council, they said they couldn't do anything. Our councillors are useless on our side. We've got 3 councillors. They don't want to know what's in Spanish. I had a lovely conversation with the Mark Speed, right?
Okay.
And the next thing was, I got a letter from the Sunderland Council solicitor saying I'm not allowed to contact the council. I mean, so how are we going to, we've got this big issue problem. We've also got flower pots, great big, Gentle won't take responsibility. People throw rubbish in there. I've seen elderly people throw
can you just tell me your question? Just what's your particular question?
Well, the question is, how are we going to clamp down on fly tipping from the genuine people? I did everything right. I got wrong off Jan 2 as the leaseholder for saying that I was fly tipping. But yet, my tenants, the tenants are allowed to dump their rubbish for 3 months and they don't want to pay this money. But I'm sorry, but if I've got to pay it,
Right, okay, thank you.
Thanks for your question. Can I just ask where you live, which ward it is?
Castle Walk.
Perhaps no surprise. Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I deal with fly tipping issues all of the time, and effective councillors can get things done. I dealt with a very similar issue to yours. I had a woman who, her bin wasn't emptied, and she contacted the council and said, oh, well, it wasn't emptied because you pushed the rubbish too far down inside of it, so we couldn't empty it. And then when she said, no, I didn't, they put the form down on her. And so I went round to our house, and the woman in question is in a wheelchair. She wasn't physically capable of pushing the rubbish down. And not only that, but she had CCTV on the house, and the bin men hadn't even approached the house. So she'd been lied to by the council. They'd failed to provide the service, and when I complained about it, all they said was, oh, well, we'll have them retrained.
The rubbish, there were stacks of rubbish there. Fridges, chest of drawers. No one would come and move it. We can't touch it because you have to pay the tenants, when you fix the tenants, they don't want to pay. Trent is all as in they say, well, there's nothing we can do. But yeah, they're harassed as a person with a disability.
Okay. Thanks very much for that. We've just got this gentleman who's had a hand up an awful long time, so just the gentleman there, right there, please.
It's actually just a question. It's like the Conservative member was saying about parks, about somebody going out and locking a park. Now, all of our communities are being affected. We don't have communities anymore. We used to have communities in the 1950s, 1960s. This kind of thing would happen on a daily basis. When the councils took away all the fences and made it all open plan, residents stopped caring for the outside of their property. I mean, I'm a horticulturalist. I've complained to the Environment Agency, everybody about over-spraying of weed killer. Now, nobody's bothered. Nobody's bothered about our communities. It's only us in them communities. I mean, I've just read the Conservatives, I think it's called the Integrated Communities Act. And I mean, we now have communities with people, I mean, for 50 years, I live in Penshaw, a very small community.
Is your question about community spirit in the area, basically?
Well, it's not only that, I mean, everything from recycling to the should we say, waste management, to the children, to everything. All of this used to be involved within the community itself. I mean, I care for my mum, she's 75, we just had, I think to help the aged out, and he was saying in there, we have no communities. Our communities have all gone, I mean...
Yeah, so great communities, you're going to come into this, and then we're going to go to the gentleman right at the back who's had his hand up for a while, and then we'll take one more question after that, thanks.
Thanks. So the campaign slogan I put on all of my literature that goes out is building a better bonds together. And I openly admit that no matter how hard I work as a councillor, I can't improve bonds without people getting involved. So one of the things I've done as a councillor is to set up the Barnes Residents Association. The people who attend that aren't all Conservatives. They could very well hate me, that doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what political disagreements they have, but the fact is they are people who live in the area, and I set that up so people can come together to do something, because I think you're quite right. I think that there are problems when people lose a sense of pride or feel like the area they live in is losing it.
Now we have lost the sense of pride. Because you go back, I mean, I've just been watching a DVD about 1950s where every school child had a Union Jack on Empire Day. Now, our communities used to be set in stone. You used to, if one person didn't come out and sit on the doorstep, you knew that old person was in trouble. Now, you now can't even go to the doctors and get a doctor out to an old person in your community, because if that old person doesn't want the help, you then get into trouble for wasting the doctor's time.
Alright.
How are you supposed to protect your community?
Just going to move to this person at the back, mate. Alright, thanks very much. Just shout at the back there, please.
Hello, my name's Stephen Ellie Coates. I was born and bred in Sunderland. I've worked since the minute I could walk and run about. I'm ex-forces. I'm a trained, qualified joiner. I've worked all over the Northern Hemisphere. The last 4 years I haven't been in the best of health. Lived in Millfield. There's good neighbours in the street. Didn't even know I lived there because I've kept myself to myself. I go out at night and walk my dog round the back lanes and I see all these tour rags, smack heads, and what they're doing to the place. And I've had the police out myself over 6 times in the last 6 months. That's just me. About people breaking in, scrap people, smack heads. I've been threatened with a 3-foot iron bar. Now, maybe the training I've had, if I went out and stopped them, I'd be jailed. Yeah. Is that right? No. If there's any use on that council here, Michael Cossett, respect you for turning up today, where's the other lot? Respect you. Is there any use wanting a party member in Sunderland before I open sticks for good? Veteran, Democrat. Give us a shout, I'll move to the area and I'll help with votes. Because if you're not, I'll take affirmative action myself with my mates and you'll see a change legally.
Oh, okay, so the question's about antisocial behaviour in Millfield.
If there's any use on there who'd like a party member, help join up, show us the ropes and I'll help. Because I've walked about for 4 or 5 years, I have to keep my mouth shut, my hands to myself. Because I get in trouble.
Okay,
I'm sick of it.
I think we would all like more party members in our political parties, and if you agree with our ideologies or broad ideology or local ideology, I think we would all welcome any new party members.
So I heard you mention veterans, so I'll pass this to a quick response over to Glenn that was going to go.
I meant run for the ward.
Sorry?
I meant run for the ward, not be a party member.
Oh,
Okay.
Councillor.
Yeah, it's too.
Right, can I take one more question? I think, did you have your hand up over there? Yeah, so just a lady over here, then I think that will do us for the half an hour. Just a lady over there, please. Just who you addressing the question to and what you got.
About that man's question about what you're talking about with communities and kids, and all of you have said that you want to open up parks and you want a healthy lifestyle, but there's nowhere for kids to go that is safe.
Just one moment, I think it freaked you a bit
There's
strange.
nowhere for kids to go that is safe. Okay. I live in Hendon and there is not one community centre for my kids to go to. There is not one youth group. There's nothing. And I personally get people dumping their stuff outside my backyard, and I've been pestered off the council 4 times by the hammering on my door.
Yeah. Okay, so the question, would you say it's about like sense of community in the area and antisocial behaviour and stuff? Yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to get one last response, we're going to get our closing remarks, and we'll wrap up then, okay? So, Councillor Munn.
I completely agree with you, and my mother, when I was 11, 12, set up a youth club where I live, and she ran it successfully from her own money for over a decade. That youth club, 2 things have happened to it. First of all, people no longer attend it. Second of all, it's now run by Councillor Phil Tye and Youth Almighty. So people like you do want to do things in their community and make them safer places to live, somewhere for people to go, keep kids off the street. And people have this kind of spirit, but I just don't think that Labour cares about people like you, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have. I know it's because apparently we don't have enough money for emptying bins, but we have enough money to build a new civic centre.
I mean, it is noteworthy as a conclusion that the people who I think you question is that as a Labour Party and they've not came here tonight, so it is one of those things, unfortunately. So maybe it's worth shooting an email to your local councillor, I don't know.
Michael Lording.
So that's a conclusion we've got.
Yeah.
So that's a conclusion for that there. Just to let you know as well, we're going to do one last little concluding remark for everyone there, just letting you know where they're running for election. If you want to get in touch with them or anything like that, we've got our mailing list clipboard going around somewhere just at the front here. So if you want to be kept up to date about Sunderland for Transparency events and volunteering, feel free to get your email on there. So what we'll do is we'll just start with Richard. If you just want to let us know if you're running any candidates, a little concluding remark, and we'll just lead off from there. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we're running a full slate of candidates in Sunderland this year, one in every ward, and we're also running a full slate for the Hetton Town Council elections. So, look forward to the results when they come out. I'd like to thank Sunderland for Transparency for organising the event and the chairman for moderating. But most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for attending and supporting the principle of free speech and tolerance. You may not have agreed with some of the views you've heard tonight, but you've sat and listened and you've had the opportunity to question the people on the panel. I find it very worrying that there are certain groups in society today that are trying to shut down our traditional rights of freedom of conscience, liberty and speech. These rights have been eroded over recent decades by the burgeoning concept of so-called hate speech driven by the political doctrine of cultural Marxism. This seeks to close down discussion and alternative views that only one extreme left-wing political correct viewpoint is allowed. And it's very, very rewarding to be able to come here and let you all listen to us speak and do it in a very polite manner. I do sincerely hope there are more hustings like this, and that it would be nice to see Labour participate, and I think the only way we can pressure Labour into attending events such as this is by voting them out at the next election. And as I say, we are fielding a full set of candidates in Sunderland and in Hetton Town Council, and we have also, I know it's not in this area, but we have a candidate for the North of Tyne mayoral election. So I hope you vote for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve.
Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for inviting me, Chris, and the Sunderland Transparency team, and thanks for all of you for coming. It's an important principle of democracy that you are allowed to question your representatives. There's one party who did not care to turn up, but nevertheless, you could vote for any one of us or any one of our parties to oust them. I hope you do. I won't say this very often, but I hope you vote anything but Labour.
Thank you very much. Well, I said at the beginning the best way to get rid of Labour in most wards was to vote Conservative, and as Theresa May is fond of saying, nothing has changed. If you vote Conservative in wards like Barnes, Fulwell, St Peters, Doxford, St Chad's, you have a chance of kicking Labour out. But I'm afraid that all of Sunderland's electoral... But if you vote for smaller parties and independents, all of Sunderland's electoral history shows that they let Labour back in. The independent candidate who stood in Barnes a few years back openly admits now that he was responsible for letting Councillor Rebecca Atkinson be re-elected. He now votes Conservative, despite the fact that he's a Scouse socialist.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo everybody to thank Chris for inviting us. Obviously, I wasn't down as being here originally, Brian was down, but he's been on holiday, unfortunately. Fortunately for him, anyway. But I do thank everybody for coming tonight. This is my first foray into council elections and politics myself. I will be standing in Hetton Ward for the Sunderland City Council for the Democrats and Veterans Party. I do think that, you know, despite obviously the Conservative Party wanting to take full control and, you know, being the major opposition to the Labour in the party in the area that they are, the smaller parties, we all need to come together to get rid of Labour in each of the areas that we can to hold people down. In Hetton, in Cobbs Hill, in Hortley Spring, you know, we have real chances of getting Labour people out. Labour have been out in Hetton since January this year. It's never ever been known to see a Labour candidate out round Hetton so early. We've been out round Hetton since January as well. Throw the usual smears at us straight away, just showing how worried they are and how we all can make a difference to them. So if we all band together as the smaller parties and, you know, come together, stand where we can, don't split votes where we can, and let's just get them out.
Oh, well, again, I'd like to thank Son of Transparency and Christopher for inviting us today. And I think it's been really encouraging to see that actually there have been areas of consensus across the panel that shows that we can actually work together for the common good instead of having petty squabbles and silly political games in the civic centre. I think that's a really encouraging thing, because I don't think people want political extremism of any kind, certainly not in the civic centres. They want hard-working councillors who are going to make sure that the bins get collected, the streets are tidy, and their children and elderly people and vulnerable people have a safe and healthy environment to live in. And I think that's something that we've all agreed on tonight. And of course the larger parties will say that voting for us is a wasted vote. Of course they're going to say that. They want you to keep voting for them forever and ever and ever, so that the pendulum just keeps swinging back and forth between Labour and Conservative, while they threaten us every time with each other. They can always point to each other and say, if you don't vote for us, you'll get them. Well, I think it's time to break that cycle. I think it's time to start voting in some alternatives.
This has been my first ever hustings and first ever public talk. It has been a pleasure to see concerned residents of Sunderland turn out for this First Ladies event. I hope the questions and answers have been informative for everyone. At one stage I thought I was the only person wanting to make a difference to the way this city functions, but listening to most of this panel, we're all singing from the same page. If enough like-minded people want to see openness and transparency, then we may be able to make a difference to our once great city.
Thanks very much, and that's a conclusion. Thanks for coming, guys. Thank you very much. And I will add, I do feel your pain about contacting parties and getting no response, but hey ho. Now we've got a response from UKIP. Health tourism is a factor, or climate change. So Tony, what would your take on that be for the health of Sunderland at the moment?
Well, I'm my dad's carer. Many of us are getting older and older every day and rely on care. But after decades of neglect of our care system, it's in total crisis. More than 1 million older people are being left without day-to-day support that they need. It's time to put an end to this injustice. That's why I'm campaigning for free personal care, so that all older people and disabled people can get the support they need with activities like washing, getting dressed, in and out of bed, cooking proper meals, instead of social services turning around saying, oh, just give them a pink meal. because they only give you half an hour for a dinner time and half an hour for a tea time. You can't cook a proper meal. So social services are recommending pink meals. Our council are reducing the hours of carers as well, resulting in neglect. And on the other matter, we have to start educating the children as to the structure of physical activity were associated with improvements in children's health. At work, wellness programs and breaks for physical activity during work hours have shown to be effective. When I took over the care of my dad, his legs, like elephantitis, massaging them, I've got them down to a normal level. This has to be shown. We went away on holiday, we left instructions. Professional carers, his legs are swelled right back up again. Just don't want to know. Social services just don't want to know. We have to address this system because they're just neglecting the physically and mentally disabled people.
Thank you very much, Tony. That was brilliant. And we've got our final debate topic, which is the other end of the age spectrum, which is children's services. Now, in July 2018, the Children's Services of Sunderland Council was rated inadequate by Ofsted. What we're going to talk about is how we can reverse this fundamentally. And a big factor that the Lib Dems highlighted was a huge amount of taxpayers' money was wasted on agencies via the Labour Council at the moment. So what's been the main take of the Liberal Democrats on the usage of agencies and the shocking rating of our children's services as inadequate by Ofsted?
Well, it's an older story than that, actually. If you look at what happened in 2015, I believe, it was took over by central government because I quote an Ofsted report, because of the political failings of the authority. Pat Smith, who was running children's services, is still in a job relating to children's services. He's head of scrutiny of that committee. I don't know how one can scrutinise their own failings, but hey ho, that's Labour for you. We have a massive amount of agency staff at the moment within the care system. It's not uncommon to have some agency staff as it flows in and out, but ours is way out of control because no one wants to work for a failing authority, and the new structure of Together with Children isn't actually improving that very well. It's plateauing, and it's not dropping as much as it should do. Not only that, I have personal experience of this care system. My mother, who adopted my nephew, had a horrendous time with checkups and criminal background checks and all that for 3.5 years. She had that. And you look at some instances where children have died of neglect, where they have not had a single social services representative out to their house. It seems pretty disgusting to me. It's a problem in which Labour have created, and it's a problem in which actually all parties on this panel and outside of this panel should take great shame on, because we need to work together to try and find a solution, and that solution is to try and bring down agency staff. That's by making sure that other authorities put a cap on how much they pay so they don't outbid us for different social service representatives. We need to get children Together with Children's costs into an actual reasonable level. They have always spent year on year on year because of agency staff. That cannot be acceptable. That service cannot keep coming back for a bailout because they can't get the right amount of staff. They need to do something within that sector. And I'm not an expert in that sector, but they need to do something within that sector where they can retain permanent staff members. And without doing that, we probably won't see the end of this problem for a very long time indeed.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Elvin, I know the family spokesman for UKIP, Alan Craig, was in the North East recently, in the past few months. What do you think could be done about the children's services in Sunderland? And Stephen said there that no one wants to work for a failing council. And is it a symptom that the use of agencies, is it the work with the council is short-termist? Or are you on a kind of short-term contract? Or what would your take on that be?
Well, I think the first comment is what children's services. I mean, it has the most appalling record, and nobody seems to ever be held accountable, responsible for its failings. As was said earlier, people just get moved around from job to job, and that's, I think, part of the problem. It's a symptom of a failing, or should I say failed, council. It's as simple as that. The council has failed. It's failing in every aspect of the lives of the citizens of this fair city. And it's, where do you start? We can come up with 101 solutions on how to rectify this problem, but we can pass them on to the powers that be in City Hall, but they won't do anything. Until we get a change of administration, I fear nothing's going to change. And I think one of the biggest problems is that the whole of this sector seems to rely on agency staff, which is to me wrong. We should have permanent staff employed by the council who are professionals who are well trained and know the job and do the job, and they should be there and be held accountable to do it correctly. But I say we can talk all night, but the problem is it's a failed council, and this is the result.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Mullen, strong words there. It's a failed council. Would you agree with that?
I think it's far worse than that. I work as an education policy advisor, and if you look at what the Ofsted reports actually said, far from just saying that it's inadequate, the reports said frontline professionals do not know how to safeguard children. Ofsted cannot guarantee that children in Sunderland are not at risk of radicalisation. That is happening in this city. Labour has overseen it. I agree entirely with the points that Richard and Stephen have made about agency staff and the damage that has been done to the reputation of the council in providing children's services, which has meant that they just cannot retain staff. People don't want to work here, they don't want to tackle the problems. But fundamentally, if we don't get Labour out, this will continue. This kind of judgment from Ofsted, which isn't political, it's not anti-Labour Party, it comes and it makes a balanced, fair assessment, and a body like that is saying of Sunderland, children are not being properly safeguarded. We cannot guarantee that they are not being radicalised. And that's happening under Labour. I think people need to consider that when they vote in May.
Now, Tony, I know Councillor Smith involved with children's services did get mentioned. I believe your party's running a candidate in that ward of which she's in. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the campaign there and really why you want to get her out of office?
Basically, everybody said what I've written down, but this goes far back as Wilwack House. They still haven't learned from there. The children and young people of our city should not be in this position. The widespread serious failures that leave children unsafe and mean that the welfare of children looked after is not adequately safeguarded or promoted. The only thing that hasn't been said is Councillor Pat Smith should have had the decency to resign. If she didn't resign, she should have been sacked.
Glyn, what's your thoughts on Councillor Smith? But without going after one person, the actual organisation of children's services, what do you think went wrong?
So, in my opinion, I think the council around children's services, it lacks accountability. It's legalist as well, in my opinion. To help things improve, you know, and whether this would be agreeable with some people or not, but at the Democrats and Veterans Party, we believe that whistleblowing should be encouraged. It should be. The people who do whistleblow should be protected. There's people out there who are persecuted for bringing subjects up, they're sacked from jobs, they run out of jobs, that's their careers down the drain, all because of revealing what's going on in children's services. So, you know, that is our belief. I mean, a lot of stuff that we do agree with has been mentioned by the other people already, but in my opinion, that is what needs to be done.
Thank you. Now, Glyn mentioned there about whistleblowing. Now, it's no secret that this council spent upward of £50 million of taxpayers' money on gagging orders. Some could argue that that could be used to quash whistleblowers by the very nature of a gagging order. So, what's your thoughts on that?
We would certainly agree that whistleblowers should be protected, that there's been a disgraceful lack of protection for them within children's services. And what has happened in Sunderland Children's Services is shameful for this city, absolutely shameful and disgraceful from the council. We do know that they knew about this. They knew about this before the first Ofsted report. We actually put in we think that the council doesn't do enough research into its activities. We think they should be looking into things more and finding solutions. We actually put in a freedom of information request to find out if the council had commissioned any research from the local university. And we found they had commissioned one piece of research, which had been published a year before that first Ofsted report, and it was into children's services. And what that report showed was that children's services in Sunderland were failing children, that they were slipping through the cracks. And what they'd done to save money was to take experienced professionals off the front line and replace them with staff who had, just a few weeks previously, been answering questions about when bin collections would be, about council tax arrears and things like that. So they tried to save money, they downgraded their operations, and when the council got the first draft of this report, they'd stopped the research before that research could go any further and start talking to social workers and managers. So they knew a year before Ofsted said that they had to take children's services away from them. And that to me is absolutely damning. They knew children were slipping through the cracks. Well, we don't think that it has, and it really needs to. And the problem is, as some other people have said, in the Ofsted report, it's still inadequate to this day. And what they've identified is a failure of management. So that's coming from the top, and it's coming from the council oversight as well. So the council needs to change, and the fact that no one has been held responsible for these failings is again absolutely shameful and disgraceful. So we need to get rid of the management, we need to get new council oversight into this operation, or it will not improve.
Okay, that concludes our debate section. Now we've just got a few quick fire questions that have been pre-submitted by members of the public here. We're going to give the panel no more than 30 seconds to a minute to respond, because these are kind of quick fire questions we've got here. So this one says here, this is from a resident in Sandhill. Following the scrapping of weekly bin collections, I have noticed a big problem with rats in back lanes. What can be done about this? And we're just going to work our way along. So, Richard Alvin, rats and back lanes, what could be done?
Reinstate the weekly bin collections.
Well, it's obvious, reinstate weekly bin collections and actually make pest control free at the point of use, because if your neighbour can't afford pest control, you're still going to have the problem. and it's not fair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Conservative government is making funding available to this council to reinstate weekly bin collection. So it's not just calling for it, it's actually doing it. And I agree, getting rid of the rats, killing them. One of the things that made me laugh was the Lib Dem candidate in Barnes put a newsletter out which called for the ethical killing of rats. Personally, I don't really care how they go as long as they do.
So what say you, Glenn? Ethical killing of rats?
Yeah, that'll work for me as well, yeah. Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I mean, I think everybody agrees with it. Weekly bin collections need to be reinstated for both blue and green bins as well. Also, reducing the cost for the brown bins, which, you know, a lot of people, it might seem not a small amount, 20 quid, but it's £20 that people can't afford. Well, there we go.
No surprises here. Encourage and advise on recycling. Get rid of the rats. Even I'm not going to argue for the ethical killing of rats. Weekly bin collections, and yeah, free vermin control. We were horrified when they brought in the charge for that. It makes a nonsense of it. We've already got a terrible rat problem in Sunderland.
Down where my dad lives, I've killed 4 rats. There's a cleaner, a street cleaner that comes around now, and he makes absolutely sure the back lanes are absolutely nipping. He lives in the area. He's proud of the area. And I talked to him, and he said, if there's any rubbish, just let us know, and I'll take it away. And that's what we need, more people living in the area that work in the area.
Next question. It's the one that's been touched upon a few times tonight, but a resident in Silksworth says the proposed civic centre has been reported at costing between 40 and 80 million of taxpayers' money. Is this really the best use of public funds? Richard Elvin.
How short do you want it? No. I mean, it's just absolutely ludicrous. But as a lot of you can probably tell, I'm not a Macam. When I came up here for the second time in my career, was here as a youngster, and I came up as not such a youngster. And I've been here for 10 years now. And when I first got here, all the local residents said, Richard, don't worry, they're going to build the new civic centre on that site. They've been saying it for years, and it's proved to be absolutely correct. It's just another vanity project, so they can have posh offices and words escape me.
Thank you.
No. The council should move into offices they already own in the city if they want to move out. I mean, we moved a library into the Winter Gardens. The council own that building, so you could easily go in there. You could go in other council buildings what they own. Having 80 million or 62 million pounds just wasted on, well, basically a suite of offices for the Labour Party is ridiculous in my view.
Thank you.
The Conservative proposal is to scrap the capital funding for the new civic centre and invest 11 million of that in a new seafront leisure centre, and then to use the rest of the money to relocate the civic centre offices into existing town centre buildings to bring more people into the city centre. It's not really in an ideal location at the minute, but to move it even further away is completely pointless.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's again pretty much agree with everybody there. No, it's not a good use of money. As we say, there's X amount of empty buildings in Sunderland City Centre that could be used to house the council in there. So no.
The current civic centre isn't fit for purpose. It's costing a fortune. It's fallen to pieces. To heat it and maintain it is costing a lot. But no, we shouldn't be building a brand new one for them between 40 and 80 million pounds. They've driven quite a lot of people out of the city centre. There's a lot of empty office space there, so let them use that instead.
They knocked a bloody good one down in Fawcett Street. Why did they need a monstrosity? There's no character to it. It's a waste of money. In the paper this morning, the figure came up with £60 million, and that would save £22 million over 25 years maintaining the civic centre. Does it compute?
Question and answer will be soon, okay?
Oh, they're gonna build houses on the civic centre. They're going to sell to a housing development.
Executive.
Yeah, executive houses.
Yeah, surely that was parkland though. That should be.
Sorry?
That used to be parkland before the civic centre was built. Surely
before my time.
Okay. Question 3. A resident in Washington Central. What are your thoughts on the proposed metro line extension through Washington? Richard Elvin.
Well, I'm a big believer in extending the metro line wherever we can. It would be of great benefit to Sunderland generally. It would allow people to move more freely around, to shop and to work. It'd be environmentally much better than people using their cars, and it's long overdue. And as I say, I can never really comprehend why these old railway lines have never been reutilised. They've been lying there for years, and it would be relatively inexpensive to reinstate them, and it would be of a huge benefit to the community.
Thank you.
I agree with Richard. Everything you just said there is correct. It needs government funding. However, are we going to get that funding? I don't think so. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Maybe Anthony can tell us.
Thank you, maybe I can. The Conservatives have long supported the extension of the metro, not just to Washington, but to places like Doxford. We'll get a metro out of the EU, possibly. This government has invested more money in the metro, but I do hope that they'll invest more so that we can see the extension.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, links for public transport to the city centre are really important, so I agree 100%. If the funding's there to Washington, Doxford Park, maybe even see me, you've got the line along there already. So, yeah, if we can get more people into the city centre, the better, yeah.
As I've already said, yes, we would absolutely agree with extending the metro to Washington and to other areas of the city as well. We want integrated public transport in this city.
Like everyone said, it's long overdue. It should have been done when the extensions were doing from South Hilton. It should have carried on. The lines are there, like Richard said. They could have carried on and gone straight through. Get on with it.
Okay, now a final pre-submitted question. A resident in Roker said, I have noticed a big link between antisocial behaviour and HMOs, that's houses of multiple occupancy, in my area. What can be done by the council to ensure HMO landlords are more responsible? Richard Elvin.
That is a massive problem. We had that in Hetton. They got their HMO certificate on the basis that it was going to be used for veterans and retired members of the armed forces, but of course it didn't end up that way, and you probably all saw it in the media, the man on the roof throwing the tiles around and setting the building on fire. It is a problem. They should be more strictly regulated and governed. They are difficult to look after and maintain, and the problem is we have a lot of rogue landlords who see it as an easy way to make a lot of money, and they are very, very irresponsible. And I think any landlord that doesn't take the job properly and doesn't do it conscientiously should be severely fined.
Thank you.
I think you have to limit the amount of HMOs. Also, I think one simple and easy step you could take is a mandatory landlord register, so you know who the homes are owned, who owns a home, so you can find them, like Richard said. And we need, and it goes back. We need more social homes. We need more family social homes as well.
Thank you.
Well, I think anybody who lives locally will be aware of the problems on Roker Avenue and Sea Road and the HMOs there and the issues related to them. One thing that you can all do is vote for Conservative councillors like me, because whenever they're proposed in Barnes, I insist that the council asks everyone in the street, and if the council doesn't, I go and knock on the doors myself and ask people's opinions. And if people don't want them, I tell the council that.
Thank you. Okay, HMOs.
Yeah, again, as Richard said, in Hetton we had the HMO with the incident on the roof, and then a couple of days later the guy tragically died in there when it was set on fire. I know, as it was said, it was granted under the assumption it was going to be used for something else, but we need stricter controls on the landlords and that. And the people in the area where the HMOs are going to be need to be aware, or need to be made aware, or that exactly what it's going to be used for, and there doesn't need to be there needs to be transparency for what it's going to be used for. You know, again, possibly a registry as well, but it needs to be addressed.
You need a permit to have an HMO to set one up, and too many have been issued in Roker, certainly along Roker Avenue. You need a mix of tenancies in any area to have a degree of stability. So we'd prefer to see some of those licences, some of those permits revoked, and those HMOs turned back into family homes and flats and things. We'd also like to see permission denied for any further HMOs in the area. We've seen planning permission put in for things that are supposed to be student residences, when actually the number of students in the area is dropping. So that will undoubtedly be turned over to other kinds of accommodation, and that's not what the area wants.
At one time there was a landlords association. I don't know if it's still running. Is it? I've never heard of it for a long time. Surely, if this landlords association can get together and sort the problem of the rogue landlords, take them to the council probably not do anything, but take the licenses away. So take the houses, the problems are in the houses. Let the Landlords Association have more power to conduct this. Otherwise, it's just going to go expansion. Greedy money.
Thanks very much. So that concludes our pre-submitted questions. Now it is time for the Q&A. So the way we're going to conduct this is, if you raise your hand for a question, I'll select you. Our volunteer column will come over with a microphone. I want you to tell me firstly who the question's addressed to, any particular panel or the whole panel, and I'll just let someone who wants to volunteer to speak. A few disclaimers: it's got to be local issues, nothing national, nothing international. It's got to be a local issue, and it's got to be aimed at any particular panelist. So I think the gentleman just there, just hand up first. So.
Hi. Hiya. It's to the whole panel. It's going back to the question of transport. It's kind of double-edged. Although it looks at a more national point, it still has a very local point to it, insofar as it's great for wealth redistribution. And the question is, what have the panel done or seen or thought about in terms of the Hyperloop? Bearing in mind, HS2 has just spent, I think the figure's 5 billion now, and they haven't laid a track yet. And the Hyperloop will get you from Newcastle to Liverpool in 18 minutes. And if the First Minister of Scotland can say, if I had this between Glasgow and Edinburgh, I'd only need one specialist cancer hospital to service 2 cities because of the transportation speed. And this is proven, by the way, the statistics are already there. There's a presentation last Friday with one of the leads of the project. It's absolutely fantastic for wealth redistribution, for the local area. Sunderland means I could phone up an Uber, it would take me to the local Hyperloop connection, and I could be in Manchester in 35 minutes from making that phone call.
Okay, so is your question...
the question is,
the Hyperloop?
How do we get behind locally the Hyperloop for the Northern Powerhouse, which Sunderland should be a big part of, and which we've been punished since 1985 for the miners' strike, for the lack of investment we've had up until now. What are we doing about that locally to encourage the nationals to drop the HS2, which just puts London as a hub?
Okay, so who wants to take that question about the Hyperloop? Anyone want to volunteer for that one? Yeah.